My name is Carolyn Childs, and I am the CEO of MyTravelResearch.com and a futurist and a strategist. Now, one thing I would say, this recording is taking place at the beginning of February 2024 and is being recorded as a vlog for our website. Now, one thing about this time of year, sort of back end of one year and the start of the next, is we see a lot of content that comes out about hot trends. And I'm actually going to talk to you about that because I plead guilty. I've done this many times myself, and I plead even guiltier that I probably will do that in future. But over the past 7 or 8 years, as I've studied and considered trends in depth, I've actually considered that often this focus on the hot trends is really can sometimes be distracting. Our time is very important. All of us in travel and tourism work very, very hard. And we often are doing so with very limited budgets. So if you are spending your time focusing on hot trends, you're often taking your mind away from other things that may be more important to your business. So often what I would try and do when I talk about trends now is to equip people to be aware of trends and almost to be your own trend spotter, but with very low effort. And so what I'm going to do over the next few of our vlogs and blogs is to actually try and, instead of that old saying of, if you give someone a fish, they have a meal. If you teach someone to fish, they can eat for life. And what I'm trying to do is to make myself redundant and turn all of you into trend spotters. So what I'm going to do is take a series of things that people talk about as being, quote, hot topics and try and generate ways of looking at them in two ways, which is one, to look at the ways that you can be alert to trends, but two, to look behind those trends. Because one of the things that I would say is that over the years, one of the things I've noticed is that when people talk about trends, they're often talking about things that actually have existed for a very long time. They've just manifested itself in a different format. And those of you who are MTR members can actually look at this as an issue of, this is something I know in for what I've lightly called the 4 laws of trends. And realistically, what my belief about trends is, trends occur, and this is the first law of trends, which is they occur when something that is a universal human need is enabled in a different way by technology. So what I'm going to do in this session and in some of the others that I do on this topic is to look at a particular trend and try and, one, unpick what sits behind that trend so that you can learn how to apply that in your own business, and two, kind of get you to think more about how you can look at these eternal trends in different ways. So the first of the trends that I would deal with was prompted by something in The Economist's Christmas issue. I have shared links to this and the other sources I'm talking about in this session today in the chat box, and they will be posted into the vlog, into the transcript of the vlog, which we will post alongside this video. So I'm just going to throw up on the screen that article because I think it's an absolutely perfect example of this. So social media's online diaries, and really I'm looking here at social media trends and particularly at social media influencer trends. So this was an article that came in the Economist culture section. As I say, I've shared a link to it. I can gift up to 5 people each month access to this article as a gift. And if you would like that, please email me at carolyn@mytravelresearch.com. And then, or you can message me in the comments box, or you can just get in touch and sign up for updates. So if you'd like to do any of those. So there's been a trend for a sort of journal influence, which is young women reading their teenage diaries to audiences online. And this is seen as a kind of hot new trend, and we're seeing that as one of the directions that influencer marketing is kind of looking at and doing things. But what I would say on that is that this is actually the article also talks about, and this is why it attracted my attention, is something I believe, which is this is just a manifestation of something that has happened for a very long time. I mean, some people think of journals as private, but it points to some articles and some work that have been done by Cynthia Huff. I've shared the article on that, and also one from the conversation that talked about, that's particularly relevant for us as travel writers, and how a specific voice can do that. So a lot of these people took journals and they published those journals, and those journals were very influential on people in terms of looking at their travels. And I think we can all think of examples in our own life. One of them that I particularly did like, and I've posted a link to it, but won't share the screen on that, is an example of someone who was traveling and then was kidnapped by pirates and almost sold into sexual slavery, and recounted her journey. And reading those kind of journals or stories, reading many travel writers, for example, talk about the fact that Lord Byron's descendant, Robert Byron, who wrote a journal of his travels, influenced them to be a travel writer. So I think we can see that trend is not a particularly new trend, and it comes through. So when we look at this in terms of influencers, I'm going to share one more piece of insight on this, because the trend of influencers itself is not something that arose with social media. And I remember when the influencer trend began, thinking back to a book that I had read and enjoyed for a long while, which is the biography of Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, by Amanda Foreman. This is later made into a movie. And it brought back to my mind, and I'm actually going to read you this. So this is from the 1780s. And it's a comment around this role. So Georgiana had become so famous that her name was enough to make anything fashionable. Sound familiar? The entrepreneur Josiah Wedgwood understood the principles of selling, what I would say is actually marketing really today, better than any manufacturer in the country. And he makes a comment: few ladies, you know, dare venture at anything out of the common style till authorized by their betters, by the ladies of superior spirit who set the ton or tone. To entice the middle classes to buy his china sets, he named them after royalty and famous aristocratic families. They want a name. A name has a wonderful effect, I assure you, he told his partner. Suppose you present the Duchess of Devonshire with a set and beg leave to call them Devonshire flower pots. And there is a classic example of an influencer in the 1780s. And I think Josiah Wedgwood's comments enable us to pick a little bit behind the influencer trend to look at what that is, which is one, the side of it that some people, Malcolm Gladwell also talks about this in his book, The Tipping Point, that there are some people who are naturally able to influence us. They tend to stand apart. They may not all be famous, but we recognize them as being somebody who's a trusted authority. And I'll come back to that when I talk briefly about nano influencers shortly. And what that happens. So there is this side of people. Some of them are people who will naturally just do this stuff. They will love it. Malcolm Gladwell calls them the mavens. They are just these people who stand out and by their behavior inspire. But increasingly what we're seeing is people realizing that that's a monetizable asset, as indeed I believe if you look at some of her actions, Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire did. And that they would actually, you know, would start to seek out and want to share their insights and knowledge. In the case of women, diarists of the 20th century, often it was a way of earning money, just as it is with influencers today. So on their side, there is that desire to share knowledge and a recognition of their economic value. But on the other side, Josiah Wedgwood's comment goes to something that we today with behavioral psychology really do understand to be something very important about humans, which is that we are social animals, and that we often, many of us, are not comfortable with making experiments until someone else drives us to do so, or until we see someone else do it. Interestingly, I just read another Economist article where he talks about how people supported Boris Johnson as Prime Minister of the UK until everyone realized that one or two people started to step outside. And then once that happened, it became a landslide of people who moved out, resigned from his cabinet and overthrew his premiership. So that instinct of wanting to belong to a crowd, wanting ourselves to demonstrate. The other thing is display or performative actions, displaying that, you know, so there's a trend on another trend at the moment, which is book core, which is a trend of people being photographed with a beautiful shelf of books behind them, which are beautifully curated, of course, but which, you know, show them to be knowledgeable. And again, this has a trend. There is a very famous picture of Georgiana's mother with, in the 18th century, when people had their portrait painted, they had their interests with them in there. So if you are somebody who is into hunting, you might have your portrait painted with your horse. So that desire to express ourselves and show who we are meets also that desire to be part of that. So people join and belong to in-groups, and it reduces the risk of what we're doing. And so that's, I think, when we look at these trends of things like TikTok journals, it's not really a trend to me. It's a manifestation of a trend. And that manifestation makes this useful, because what it enables you to do is to be able to look at this and to be able to say, okay, is this the right thing for my audience? But also to look at other trends and things that are being reported as ways to do things and say, does it meet either of those two needs? Is this somebody who connects with my audience, who has a natural alignment with our brand? And is this somebody who connects with the audiences that I want to talk to? And I think if you always think about that when you are looking at influencers and also use of celebrity endorsements, for example, you have to be looking at this and saying, who is it? And another great example of that is Tourism Australia's use of Chris Hemsworth as somebody. We know that women around the world enjoy watching movies with Chris Hemsworth in, and we know that women are the major travel planners. He also happens to be a very proud Australian, a very successful Australian, and to live in some very beautiful parts of Australia as a result. And so you can start to see how all of those things come together. And as I say, what I would always like you to be thinking is, how is this relevant to me? And to ask yourself those simple questions around this, and to apply a degree of skepticism to trends. Because I think we've now seen that the trend of influences is around 220 years old. And one of the diaries I referred to was published in 1774. So the trend of influencer journaling in the most up-to-date media of the time, were, you can clearly see that is not a new trend. It's something that you can make to work to your advantage. I would always caution on top of that, as I do with all marketing trends and use of things, remember that opportunity cost and ask yourself what you're not doing if you're using this, and is that something that you should be doing? If you're intrigued by what I'm talking about on either influencers or trends, and you are a member of MyTravelResearch.com, I'm now going to share my screen again and show you two further pieces of information. Again, I've posted links to these in the feed for the chat, and they will be posted into the transcript of this blog on the website. So the first of those is getting the most out of influencers. And you can see, so we actually have a whole presentation on this. We will be adding a recording because there's I'm bringing out an updated version of that. So you can find that there. And if you would like to, you can also then go straight to, we have a whole section, and I've posted the link to the trends, which is a section on this idea of understanding and predicting trends that I'm talking about. But also we do have our law of trends. We do have some infographics that you can download to look at and understand this. So thank you for listening. If you do have any questions, please post them in the comment box on the vlog, or you may actually also then email me. I won't be giving the whole influencer or trends details away, but if you message us at Carolyn@MyTravelResearch.com, or if you post a comment, we will be happy to share with you the infographics on our laws of trends. So now over to you, and please do update us with comments on what you're doing.